We've been fiddling with the track, which is the width of the wheels, and today we're going all wide in a bid to see what's the best we can make this thing in stock form without spending more money on it. We've done wide front, narrow rear. We've done narrow front and rear. Off camera, I've done wide rear and narrow front, and that actually went all right. So now we're going to do wide front and rear. I can't wait to find out. Let's do it. Third time's the charm. This is the Vanquish Products VS4-10 Phoenix Portal. And by now you will have seen the review and the next one where I made it worse. What this is about today is trying to see if we can turn this from a trail truck into a crawling machine. Because on paper, this is a super impressive machine. There'd be a bunch of people at Vanquish who have poured their heart into this thing. It's quite evident from the machine. I'm thankful for that effort, and I can see the love and care and attention that went into it, and I really want to see this thing do well. We've got a very flat undercarriage, and we've got portals. And the kit comes with wide and narrow adapters. Let me see if we can show you here. So the adapters are the bit that the wheel bolts onto. You know, we can get a wider hex to move the wheel out further. This has a hex, but then it has an adapter that sits on top of that, which is what these wheels bolt onto. When I first did this review, I had the wide adapters on the front and I had the narrow adapters on the rear. And so the track on the front was a certain width and the rear was about 1/2 centimeter on each side less. So it was about that much less on each side. So your rear wheels were closer together than the front wheels. We did 4 out of 6 problems on my 6 problem test course here. Thinking about it after that review, I thought I really should probably have more narrow track front and rear. So I put the narrow adapters on the front as well. And once you know it, it made it worse. I've got to start thinking, given the performance went down on my test course just for crawling, these wide adapters are included for some reason. I went to convert this back to wide, but I just put the rear ones on first, just for science. And I came down here on my own just before and drove it just with the wide rears. It worked hard, but it did problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, problem 5, and once problem 6. That's just with the wide rear and the narrow front. And I also noticed that it could pick itself back up off the side easily. So I'm kind of excited. I haven't driven this yet with the wide front and rear, but you're going to join me for this one if you'd like. And we're going to see if the wide wheel adapters are really what makes the VS4-10 sing. Let's do it. Right, VS4-10 problem 1 with the wide front and rear track. First attempt. I've never driven this thing with wide front and rear, but I have a sneaking suspicion it might be actually quite all right. Oh, yeah, that's already a lot better. Not perfect. It's such a long and wide machine and has such a flat undercarriage that it still gets hung up on stuff. The breakover angle mustn't be so good, I suppose. But I will say, even doing stuff like repositioning, it's a lot better. Smoother. Come on. Oh, now check this out. You ready? It just did it, but it did it. Now, we couldn't do that before with the narrow front and rear, nor with just the wide front and narrow rear. Although I did notice just with the wide rear, I was able to, even with a narrow front, I could get it back on its wheels. There we go. Now we're done. So this is problem 1 in the bag. Probably. Oh. Now, you've seen this on camera before, and yeah, I can't count that. The other thing I've noticed is a little bit more wheel speed actually works quite well with this truck. You had my nerdy little laugh then because it was only wheel speed that did that. Yeah, I don't think we would have finished problem 1 without that wheel speed. Anyway, problem 2. Now we're wide, and we have reasonably good stability wider. And again, Vanquish has provided the wider wheel adapters. I've got to think that testing has indicated, or their design it's designed in mind to be wider. It doesn't like tumbling, but with a wider track, you're not going to tumble as easily. And when you do, Well, when you do it, it'll be worse, but I don't think I've ever seen a truck go up on two wheels like that before on this problem. There we go. So right now the rear is just freewheeling and the front just pulled it home. Now it's engaged. Let's try problem 3. Okay, problem 3. Now while we try this, another important thing worth noting here is I haven't edited this video yet, but when I do, I'm not going to have to cut out a bunch of attempts or summarize them. We've managed to do this on first or second go so far, problem 1 and 2. And that is a first for the Phoenix. So I rather suspect this thing will do best wide, at least it clearly has so far. It's also going to mean I need a different approach to driving. Deary me. It definitely is harder to tip now. There we go. Done. Now if there's any problem that this thing isn't going to finish, it'll be this, problem 4. And in particular, it's going to be on the rock in front of the one it's on now. This guy here. This tests breakover angle, and I'm going to need to use throttle to get us over, I think. Oh, it's so close. It's going to fall. I mean, if you can finish it, it counts, but it should be it should be something you can replicate. Like, even if I finish this one now, we can claim it, but it's just not going to be as tidy a win. I'm just going to freewheel the rear. There we go. I wonder. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. That's all right. On to problem 5. Okay, problem 5. Now, while we approach here, I'll just say another thing. I've been thinking that this is a trail-oriented machine, at least before I did the wide front and rear track here. But its major shortcoming as a trail machine is that it's still quite slow. Being a single speed and that I've geared it for crawling, it kind of ends up being a decision you have to make on the workbench rather than on the controller when you're driving, which is obviously what 2 speed's for. We've done this weird crab walk. Now, you'll notice with the dig, I actually don't often lock it. Even when I'm using it, I'll freewheel. It's just a question of having control where you want the control. Anyway, it's engaged again. There we go. All right. So she's a slow machine, but gee, I just want to get the geometry right because there's such potential here for it to be an amazing crawler. I have a suspicion that bent lower links will be helpful too, just to help it have that extra clearance. The skid and the lower links are riding on the rocks a lot, like they are right now. Those front lower links are sitting on the rock, and sitting on the rock like that means friction, which means we sit here and just spin our wheels. Yeah, there we go. Straight axles on this vehicle. I've heard some people talking about straight axles on this vehicle. I actually don't watch much in the way of videos about the cars I'm doing. I'll have a look through what other people have done after I've made my video series, but I prefer to have things fresh, just so you're just getting my thoughts rather than regurgitating others. But now that I'm a couple of videos in, I've listened to a few opinions and I'm hearing people talk about having a straight axle kit for this. Without bent links, this thing's going to be sitting on its skid even more. It really needs all the help it can get as it is. But that was smooth at the end, so that was good. All right, here's the big one, problem 6. Now, I came out here just before, when I was changing the wheels over, I put the wider adapters on the rear and left the narrows on the front, just because I hadn't done that yet. And you know, it managed to finish problem 6, just with the wider rear. This could use more wheel speed, you know. It really isn't insignificant. All right. See, being wider, we can get back up on our feet now from being on the side. Couldn't do that before. I think wide's the right answer for this truck. I really, well, at least the testing seems to suggest that's the case. Come on. God. I tell you what, it wants to do it. And I know it can now. Well, I don't know it can actually. I know it could with just the wide rear. Can it do it with the front? It's done problem 6. Now that is a win. Wide front, wide rear. That's what we need on this vehicle. We've done problems 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and it did it more easily than it has so far. This body has suffered nasty amounts of punishment when we had the narrow track. I'm so pleased to be able to show you some improvement. Narrow front and rear was the worst with just 2 out of 6. Wide front, narrow rear gave us 4 out of 6 problems successfully done, but it still struggled. So wide rear, narrow front, we got 4 problems done, and it was able to pick itself back up. And I would say it was different, but still similarly capable to having a wide front and narrow rear. I would look at both of those as being clues that this is designed or best suited to the wide adapters that it includes. Wide front and rear, problems 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 completed successfully. And the other thing to note is it was a lot easier on the body, a lot easier on the motor. It took half the time and it was fun, more fun. I said this earlier on in this video, this is a product of much labor and love. It's so apparent that this thing's been built with care and attention. And when I'm reviewing rigs, unless they're a blatant clone of some other rig, I'm aware that there's the livelihood and the dedication and the passion of people into designing things. And it's apparent, you know, some things are cheap and capable more than you would expect. And that's a happy thing, but they're not necessarily inspired. When you get something like this that's just different, and clearly they've had to, I mean, I know some stuff's been reused from some of the earlier VS4, like the Pro rigs and whatnot, but even so, as a cohesive machine, honestly, I want to see this thing do well, because people have poured their hearts and their love into this kind of thing, and I'm so pleased to see improvement. From my perspective, being aware that we're all limited and there's heaps I don't know about crawling, I know enough that I can see where it's working hard, and I'm thinking maybe bent lower links, front and rear, would be advantageous. We've got some pretty gnarly chunking out in the first half of each side, and what bent links will do is they'll just make this part that's touching up, it'll just move them up a little bit, and then they'll bend down at the end to kiss where they're on the axles. I don't know if such links exist in the market, but they're not that hard to make, so I might make just a set of steel ones myself from 5mm steel. We'll see how that goes, because I really would like to see this thing do all 6. And right now, our big trouble is behind us here. Problem 4 It's that rock, that transition. I'll show it now while I'm talking. It's that transition where it goes from one peaked rock to the next one, and it's such a gap and it's so sharp that it catches the middle. It catches the middle of almost all rigs, but I say geometry a lot because it refers to how the vehicle moves over obstacles as a whole. So it might be getting caught up in the middle, but the wheels are still able to reach down depending on how the thing's set up. Now we've got portals here, 4.65 inch tires. That's the same diameter. It's the same diameter as the Sendero HD and on the or the TRX4 in general. The Canyon Trails are 4.65. These are more narrow a little. They're also harder, and I wonder whether, I said this in the review, I wonder whether grooving these lugs, see they've got little lines in them, but if you groove them more deeply, it allows both sides of that single lug to kind of bend and flex. And you don't have to do all of them. Some people cut every second or third one out as well, just to give it some extra profile to kind of grab onto the rocks. I don't know how useful that'll be either, but I mean, you get one chance with a set of tires. When you start cutting, there's no going back from cutting. I do wonder whether softening these things up would be beneficial because they do feel quite hard around the edges. That might be something to look at, that and bent links. So that might be what we do in the new year. For now, wide front and rear, that's the answer. Thanks for tagging along on this little experiment so far. It's been actually quite fun getting this thing to drive better. It's a beautiful machine, and I'm so pleased that I'm pleased it exists, and I would love to see what people do with them. Thanks for joining me. Throw me a like if this was useful, and if you're watching at that time of year, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a safe and happy New Year. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I wish you happy crawling at the very least. Thank you so much for spending the time with me on the rocks. I will catch you next time on RC-TNT.